Something extraordinary is unfolding right now in the Caribbean Sea, something we haven't witnessed in decades. The United States is deploying more military assets here than at any point in the 21st century, forming the largest concentration of American power in the Western Hemisphere since the invasion of Panama in 1989. But this time, the target isn't a small Central American state. The buildup is happening right outside the territorial waters of Venezuela, the country often described as Washington's fiercest rival in the region. 3 modern Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, at least 1 nuclear-powered submarine, and hundreds of Tomahawk missiles are sitting just offshore. Alongside them sails the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, carrying thousands of Marines aboard the USS Iwo Jima, a ship that looks less like a transport vessel and more like a mini aircraft carrier equipped with Harrier attack aircraft, Osprey assault helicopters, Sikorsky heavy lift helicopters, and amphibious vehicles capable of storming beaches. If that wasn't enough, the fleet has been reinforced with the combat ship USS Minneapolis-St. Paul and additional F-35 fighter jets flown into Puerto Rico. In total, 9 American warships, 1 submarine, and more than 4,000 military personnel. On paper, this is presented as an anti-drug operation. But really, does anyone believe this much firepower is needed to stop speedboats smuggling cocaine? That is why speculation is running wild. Is Washington preparing to take direct action against Nicolás Maduro? After all, just weeks before this buildup, the U.S. doubled the bounty on Maduro's head from $25 million to an unprecedented $50 million, the largest bounty ever placed on a single individual in U.S. history. To put that into perspective, the bounty on Osama bin Laden was $25 million. Saddam Hussein, also $25 million. Even Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, leader of ISIS, was valued at half the price of Maduro. And Maduro isn't alone. His interior minister, his defense minister, and his industry minister all carry multi-million-dollar U.S. bounties, adding up to over $100 million. These are not the figures of a government the United States considers legitimate. These are the numbers reserved for terrorists and fugitives. So the question is, why now? Why is the U.S. surrounding Venezuela with warships and Marines? The answer goes beyond drugs. It ties into decades of history: oil, corruption, sanctions, and a battle for influence between world powers. To understand how we reached this boiling point, we need to rewind. Venezuela should be an energy superpower. It controls the largest proven oil reserves in the world, even bigger than Saudi Arabia. In the 1970s, oil money made Venezuela the richest country in Latin America. American companies like Exxon, Chevron, and Shell poured in, building refineries along the Gulf Coast designed specifically to handle Venezuela's heavy crude. For a while, it worked. The U.S. became Venezuela's biggest customer, and Venezuela became America's top supplier. But corruption and mismanagement poisoned the system. By the 1980s, collapsing oil prices triggered debt crises, IMF bailouts, and riots. In 1992, a young army officer named Hugo Chavez tried to seize power in a coup. He failed, went to prison, but by 1998 he was elected president, promising socialism and redistribution of oil wealth. At first, Chavez reduced poverty and gained massive popularity. But his policies slowly wrecked the industry. He fired thousands of skilled oil workers, nationalized foreign assets, and drove away investment. Oil production began to collapse. When Chavez died in 2013, his successor Nicolás Maduro inherited an economy that was already unstable. Then came the 2014 oil price crash, and everything fell apart. By 2016, Venezuela's economy was in freefall. Hyperinflation reached levels seen only in failed states. Poverty skyrocketed. Millions fled the country in what became Latin America's largest refugee crisis. Washington responded with sanctions. Under Obama, targeted measures were introduced. But under Trump, the policy escalated into maximum pressure. U.S. companies were banned from buying Venezuelan oil. Spare parts for refineries were blocked and financial access was cut off. The idea was simple: strangle Maduro's regime until it collapsed. Instead, it pushed Venezuela closer to America's rivals. Russia, China, Iran, and Cuba all rushed in to fill the gap, sending weapons, buying oil, and providing intelligence support. Maduro dug in deeper. Elections in 2018 were widely seen as fraudulent, with opposition leaders barred from running. The US and dozens of allies recognized opposition figure Edmundo González as Venezuela's legitimate president, while Russia, China, and Iran stood behind Maduro. Venezuela had become a front line of the new Cold War, but sanctions didn't remove him. Protests were crushed, opponents exiled or jailed, and the regime survived. The escalation fast forward to today. Maduro has grown more authoritarian than ever, and the 2024 election was another blatant fraud. Both sides claimed victory, but Maduro refused to release vote tallies. González fled into exile, and protests were met with violence. At the same time, Venezuela held a referendum to claim 70% of neighboring Guyana ES territory, home to massive offshore oil reserves largely operated by ExxonMobil. An invasion of Guyana would not only destabilize the region, it would also threaten U.S. energy security. Washington couldn't tolerate that. So now, with Maduro isolated, facing internal unrest and sitting on oil fields that America and its allies desperately want to stabilize, the pressure is reaching its peak. And this brings us back to the warships circling Venezuela today. Let's be clear, the U.S. has not sent enough troops for a full-scale invasion like Iraq, but that may not be the plan. Instead, the goal could be surgical strikes. Tomahawk missiles hitting command centers, drone strikes on cartel targets, or even a decapitation strike against Maduro himself. Another possibility? The U.S. may be hoping that the mere presence of overwhelming firepower, combined with a $50 million bounty, encourages someone inside Venezuela to turn against Maduro, sparking a rebellion. Washington could then provide air support, similar to what NATO did in Libya in 2011. But there's also enormous risk. Military strikes could backfire, uniting Venezuelans behind Maduro in a wave of nationalism. Toppling him could plunge the country into chaos, creating another Libya or Iraq in South America. And given Venezuela's ties to Russia, China, and Iran, foreign intervention could spiral into something much bigger. Right now, Venezuela stands at a crossroads. The United States has mobilized its most powerful display of force in the Caribbean in more than 3 decades. Maduro is defiant, calling millions to arms and deploying troops to the Colombian border. Both sides are escalating, and the room for error is razor thin. The U.S. says this is about drugs, but everything we've seen, the warships, the bounties, the rhetoric, points to something far larger. So the questions remain. Is Washington preparing to finally remove Nicolás Maduro from power? Will this lead to limited strikes or an all-out regional conflict? And most importantly, how will history remember what's happening right now in Venezuela? Only time will tell. The Caribbean hasn't been this close to the brink of war in decades, and whether this ends with Maduro's fall, a bloody conflict, or just another standoff, it could reshape the balance of power in the entire Western Hemisphere. If you want to stay ahead of what happens next, make sure to like this video, share it with others who follow global events, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that are shaping our world.